Folks, we're talking with Chris Hudson, Americans for Prosperity Action. We're going to break down the U.S. Senate race here in Florida. And, Chris, when we look at this, I mean, if there's anything that's even closer than the governor's race, it's the Senate race. It literally is one of only three toss-up Senate races by 538. All the polls are back and forth, and literally we're not even in margin of error. We are literally within 0.5 to 1% difference between Bill Nelson and Rick Scott. And what is you think the situation on the ground with folks, and how that is kind of tightened up so quickly?
Well, one, the governor is extremely disciplined, and he's been on message. Two, Senator Nelson just took a vote against Brett Kavanaugh to be appointed, to be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. That says loads about the things that our current elected official in the U.S. Senate and our would-be elected official in the U.S. Senate are thinking. Rick Scott is campaigning on a record of accomplishment over 8 years. And by the way, we are one of those few groups who's happy to slug it out with the best of them. And I can tell you, we only agree with Rick Scott about 90% of the time. We have found ourselves in the ring slugging against each other on more than one occasion. But when comparing the two, and this is what we're hearing in the field and when we talk to individuals, that it's just night and day, and that people more and more, as the economy and the things that have happened in here in Florida that are for the positive benefit for all, are being attributed to Rick Scott and his hard work over 8 years, people are starting to say, what has Bill Nelson done for 30? And when they start to hear about Bill Nelson's health care plan, the one that essentially takes more options off the table for individuals to secure their care, they're absolutely shocked. He supported Obamacare, something that's not working. At this point, you would think he would do the reasonable thing by providing more options to care, more access, quality. That's not the direction he's going. He's happy to sponsor SJR 63, which in Congress does essentially that. It just limits and takes options off the table for folks to get care. And one of the biggest things we hear every single day is that it's Washington who has done the greatest disservice. And I think you find yourself wondering, if the man had 30 years, what can he possibly do with more time on the clock? Rick Scott had 8, and he did everything under the sun, both that he promised and things no one ever thought that was achievable before. And so folks at the door, as they're educated on the issue, they're starting to understand.
Do you think that was pretty much the divide that came down after the debate, too? Like I think Rick Scott did. Pretty much like you said, he stayed on point, stayed on message. This was his message. And Bill Nelson just, it's kind of like pounding the drum of, I've been there, send me back. And he's not offering a lot of insight for folks who are asking a lot of questions.
I always wonder about these debates sometimes. But I think by and large, Bill Nelson struggled to stay fresh. He struggled to say why his health care ideas were good for Floridians. He struggled to explain why supporting, big government was good for Floridians. He failed to explain why supporting tax increases and spending is good for Floridians. And I think Rick Scott does what Rick Scott always does, is he comes from a business background. He looks at the landscape, and he makes those hard decisions. And, I don't think it's hard for folks to watch that, irrespective of what you thought looking at that debate going into it. One was poised in the pocket and offering some new viewpoints, and the other was offering the same one. He's always offered.
Chris Hudson, Americans for Prosperity Action. Chris, put out the website and social media stuff where people can find more about your organization, what you guys are working on, and how to connect with you.
Chris Hudson, I'm a senior advisor for Americans for Prosperity Action. And feel free to reach out to me anytime at chudson@afpaction.com and follow us on social media.
Absolutely great. We can thank Chris for his time. And folks, you want to stay with us, we're going to continue with some more political talk when we come back from the break.